Hello, my name is Brian Burke, and today I want to talk about the campaigns of those running for the House of Representatives District 22 in Texas. Specifically, I want to talk about the two Republican frontrunners. Pete Olson, the current representative, is retiring this year, and it has caused a mad dash on the Republican side of things to find his replacement. Two candidates seem most likely, but after the melee, the victor will still have to run against the Democratic nominee. I'll go over the issues pages of the two campaign websites to make my observations. Before we begin, I did intend to cover Sri Kulkarni, the Democrat, but ran against time constraints. After all, voting for the last primary begins in a few days. I probably will do a comparison, or at least a discussion, of him and whoever the Republican nominee is at a later time. An introduction of Kathleen Wall. She's a brilliant woman with a fair number of business ventures under her belt. She has done much work in the way of partisan organizations as well. She, at the very least, on paper has the proper qualifications for Congress. On her issues page, she has three main areas that she is campaigning on. They are labeled as border security, stop illegal immigration, and pro-life. Right off the bat, you should notice that two of those, specifically border security and stop illegal immigration, are related. So, in actuality, she is running on two main issues. Fair enough, single issue voters probably quite like this, as there isn't information overload. But if we actually take a look at the issues page, there's little information at all. Under border security, all that is said is we must protect our borders. If we don't have a border, we don't have a country. Hashtag this wall will build the wall. Points for creative wordplay with their name. The problem here is that there isn't a clear explanation of why a wall is the best solution for border security. Personally, I would be fine with just expanding Border Patrol. With this explanation, she is speaking to a particular set of Republican voters who already agree with her. She should have given more information here about why she supports a wall, why she believes it's the best solution. Instead, we are left with a platitude more than a platform. Her second issue is headed, Stop Illegal Immigration. Here she gives us a full three-sentence explanation of her position. Illegal immigration threatens our families, community, and democracy. I will support President Trump's agenda and work to deport criminal illegal immigrants. We need a fair policy that protects the sovereignty of Texas and this great nation. Once again, points for something that isn't actually part of her statement. I like her use of the Oxford comma. It's a vital part of written English, and it's annoyingly left out often. Back to the subject at hand. Illegal immigration threatens our families, community, and democracy. How? Don't misunderstand me, I agree with this statement completely. The problem here is that it doesn't convince those who disagree, and it doesn't defend itself from attack. I wish we lived in a nation where this statement was considered self-evident. The reason why it isn't is beyond me, but we don't live in such a nation. I will support President Trump's agenda and work to deport criminal illegal immigrants. What exactly is Trump's agenda and why does she support it? This also speaks to a particular subset of Republicans. I dislike this kind of appeal. Appeals to authority are generally weak and can be easily dismissed by those who just don't accept the authority. This only appeals to the pro-Trump base, a group that isn't pulling in more voters. Once again, don't misunderstand me. Trump's agenda on illegal immigration has been generally positive so far as I can tell. I'm not upset by the idea that my elected representative would work with Trump on this issue, but I don't know why she has come to the conclusion that she has, and so I don't know what limiting factors she has in her belief. My second problem comes down to the use of the term criminal illegal immigrants. This is not due to some bizarre notion about the term illegal immigrants being profane. Rather, it is due to the vague nature of the word criminal in this context. Is she saying every illegal immigrant is a criminal? That is a true statement, but it is adequately conveyed by the word illegal. The other possibility that she is saying that those who have committed an additional offense beside the aforementioned illegal immigration, that would be fine and dandy as well, although I believe that isn't a broad enough mandate. I think that the best possible reading of this statement is that she wants to deport illegal immigrants, but she will put forth special focus on those actively harming the Union. Really, the problem seems to be a need for more clear phrasing. The last sentence is probably the worst of this heading. Nay, the entire page. We need a fair policy that protects the sovereignty of Texas and this great nation. No duh. Every red-blooded Texan would agree with this statement. What's the policy, Kathleen? Interestingly enough, I think that if she were to have used this as an opening sentence to a heading about states' rights, it would have been a remarkably powerful opening to expound upon the need for a reduction in federal power. The final heading she has is simply pro-life. If that was the end of it, she would have been in a better place than with her attempted explanation. I'm 100% pro-life. I fought for this issue for years, and I will never give up on trying to protect innocent human life. What does 100% pro-life mean? If she's going to try to give me something to latch onto, then I need something to latch onto. Her last sentence, I've fought for this issue for years and will never give up on protecting innocent human life, feels a bit weak. The sentiment is admirable, but the expression leaves something to be desired. How has she fought in the past? She brings up her history, but doesn't expound on it. How does she plan to fight in the future? This question may seem a bit unfair. Obviously, she's running for Congress. My problem with this I have already expressed. What's the policy, Kathleen? How does she plan to fight for life? I want to finish my discussion about her issues page on a bit of a less antagonistic note. Wall and I probably generally agree on the vast majority of problems and have similar views of how the nation should progress. If I were to sit down and talk with her, we'd probably have more views in common than not. As a transition from Kathleen Wall to Troy Nehls, I would like to quickly cover a point of contention between the two. One of the ads Wall put out was an attack ad about Nehls' failure to combat human trafficking. Combating trafficking is actually one of the things that Nehls is running on, so either Wall is pointing to a major failure that voters should know about, or she is muckraking about to injure a more prepared candidate. I don't particularly like attack ads, and the fact that she doesn't propose a counter policy in that attack ad indicates to me that it's likely the latter rather than the former. On to Troy Nehls properly now. He is a retired Army vet. He spent his time post-military as a law enforcement officer. He admits to being a Methodist, which offends my Baptist sensitivities. I joke. The first position he takes on his issue page is headed Standing with President Trump. I already mentioned my problems with making Trump support a policy position, though Nehls does a better job of it than Wall. He mentions substantive things Trump has done, offering a reason to actually support Trump. He mentions the new Supreme Court justices as a positive, though recently Gorsuch admitted to not reading the law as written. He mentions the construction of a border wall, which has been added to over time. Maybe someone should tell that to Ann Coulter. Nehls mentions a booming economy and record low unemployment. This indicates to me that the issues page hasn't been updated since at least March. It is true that until the lockdowns, the economy was booming, and it can be, in large part, attributed to the economic policies of Trump. It is, however, difficult to have a strong economy when no one can leave their home. I do not believe that any intellectually honest individual could use this to cut against Trump. However, it is not wise to maintain a position based on how great the economy is at this time. The use of the phrase "for every demographic" shows its squeamishness about issues of race. A more bold phrasing might be "for Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, and all Americans." Honestly, though, I would rather have someone who is uncomfortable with race at all than someone who is overly eager to engage with race baiters. As I have said before, either race matters or it doesn't, and if it doesn't matter, then who cares? And if it does matter, then we have to deal with the fact that it leads to very uncomfortable situations. Nehls also brings up Trump's promise to drain the swamp, a euphemism for clearing out a corrupt bureaucracy. Your feelings on this particular issue are probably highly dependent upon your feelings about Trump. Nehls states that his time as sheriff has given him the skills to aid Trump in this draining of the swamp. I wish that he would have expanded on this idea, as it isn't clear to me how the two are related. His second heading is human trafficking, which, as I mentioned before, is an area where he was attacked by a wall. Nehls starts this section by discussing why it matters to him. His reasoning is found in his wife and daughters. Normally, I dislike emotional appeals, especially regarding family, but in this instance, he's appealing not just to emotion, but to his patriarchal duties to protect his wife and kids. It's a surprisingly elegant mix of pathos and ethos. He doesn't beat around the bush that human trafficking happens, even under his watch. Rather, he is clear that he has worked to combat it as best he can, targeting the areas where it is most common. He believes that this experience will aid him in combating human trafficking at a federal level. The next heading is Protect Second Amendment. For those who don't have the Second Amendment memorized, it reads as such: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Put in less archaic language, it would probably read more along the lines of, an operational military body not under government control is a requisite to a free society. As such, the right of citizens to keep and bear arms can never be restricted. Nehls establishes his Pro 2A credentials by pointing out how the National Rifle Association rates him. My defense of the Second Amendment is the phrase, shall not be infringed. Nehls, of course, seems pretty comfortable in his 2A convictions. By his own admission, bragging really, he suggested that looters avoid Fort Bend County lest they leave in a decidedly less alive state than when they arrived. His use of the term gun-grabbing socialist is a bit of a misfire, however. According to the 2019 to 2021 platform of the Socialist Party, they are in fact pro-gun. I don't think they have defense of private property in opposition to actual tyranny in mind, but that doesn't make Nehls' phrasing useful. Gun-grabbing Democrats would have been a generally more apt description. His next heading is border security. His first statement is objectively untrue, though well-meaning. There is no constitutional obligation to defend any American border. The assumption made by the Founding Fathers was that any nation would self-evidently recognize that control of its borders was a moral obligation. The Constitution, rather, grants the powers to fulfill that moral obligation to the federal government, specifically Article 1, Section 9 for those who are interested. Oddly enough, the same section is the one used to prohibit the importation of new slaves into the U.S. Nehls mentioned his experience in dealing with illegal immigrants. His use of the phrase criminal illegals is actually far easier to parse than Wall's similar term. He is specifically talking about the tragedy that is career criminals repeatedly entering the country. That's not to say he doesn't want to remove those who are here illegally. Clearly he does. He has four main statements about border security. Put the American people first, build the wall, end sanctuary cities, and deport criminal aliens. The first one is simple enough and inoffensive as they come, though it seems to elude a fair number of people. The second one I discussed my view while talking about Kathaleen Wall. I don't care whether a wall is built or not as long as the U.S. controls its own border. His desire to end sanctuary cities is validated by the Constitution. I mentioned Article 1, Section 9 before, but I find it relevant to point out that Congress does have the power to prohibit immigration. Sanctuary cities are a bizarre way to attempt to override a power that is actually reserved to the federal government. Congress specifically. His use of the term criminal aliens is interesting to me. It's broader than illegal immigrants or even illegal aliens. Criminal aliens implies a desire to deport anyone not a citizen that breaks the law. I'm not sure that I am quite comfortable with this phrasing. Deport all legal immigrants? Sure, sign me up. All illegal aliens? Well, I'm willing to have a discussion about a mild amount of clemency for overstayed visas, but okay. Criminal aliens? I'm not sure that all criminal offenses are deserving of deportation. Maybe they are, or maybe Nehls hasn't thought through his position here quite well enough. I still need to be convinced. The penultimate section is labeled National Debt. This is probably the least interesting section of his issues page. He expresses indignation at the wild spending that Congress engages in. His solution is obvious to anyone with a greater understanding of budgeting than a 4-year-old. Cut spending. It's sad that this is a policy position that people actually take to get elected. Not because it's bad, but because it's self-evident. Duh, you cut spending to avoid overspending. I commend Nehls for recognizing this issue, but am despaired that we live in a world where this is considered commendable. I have to criticize him for something, though, so I will. He doesn't say where he will cut spending, which to me is a bit concerning. From his previous stated positions, I don't expect him to cut something absolutely necessary like military, but I think it'd be nice to know where he plans to reduce spending. He finishes his issue page with fighting for veterans. Here he expresses desire to correct the problems found in the VA healthcare system. The problem is he doesn't express any policy here to attack or defend. It's a completely vacuous statement that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Of course people want to fix the VA. Who wants to be known as the guy who hates veterans? I can't reckon with how well the policy proposal will work if there's no stated policy. Going into this project, I was generally more amenable to Kathaleen Wall, but after having read over the issues pages, I've become more favorable towards Troy Nehls. He articulates his positions better than Wall. If I had to claim an ideological problem with Nehls, it'd be the lack of a pro-life position. Though Ballotpedia indicates that back in April his issues page included a section about the right to life. Judging by the quote as written on Ballotpedia, it was probably cut due to its religious phrasing. It's quite a shame, really. Here there's actual policy taken that would have been nice to discuss. I'm disappointed that I didn't pay more attention to this race earlier. It would have been nice to be able to create a full rundown of the candidates and their positions over an extended period of time. While wrapping this up, I found that Nehls may have had a checkered history with gun control in sanctuary cities. I find it interesting that those are two areas he charges right into with his issues page, so I will admit I don't know whether he has changed his views or not. Regardless of how this race turns out, the district will be determined in November, so there's still time for a shift in position from the nominee, either a move towards moderation or a doubling down.